In the winter of 1845, a 27-year-old man walked into the frozen woods of Massachusetts with nothing but an axe, some borrowed tools, and a conviction that would change American literature forever. His name was Henry David Thoreau, and he was about to discover something that the modern world has spent 180 years trying to forget. That solitude is not loneliness, it is power. But what Thoreau found in those woods went deeper than anyone realized. On his third night alone in the cabin he built with his own hands, something extraordinary happened. He sat by the window watching snow fall in absolute silence. No voices, no demands, no expectations from anyone. And for the first time in his life, he heard his own thoughts with perfect clarity. Not the noise of society, not the borrowed opinions of others, but his own authentic voice rising from depths he never knew existed. That night he wrote a single sentence in his journal that would never be published during his lifetime. In solitude, I discovered I was never alone. I was finally myself. This is not a story about isolation. This is about the forgotten art of being powerfully, intentionally alone. Because in a world that measures worth by connections, followers, and constant availability, the ability to sit with yourself without distraction has become the rarest and most valuable skill on earth. What Thoreau understood, what every titan of history from Marcus Aurelius to Steve Jobs discovered, is that greatness does not emerge from the crowd. It emerges from the silence. Consider this. Every single breakthrough in human history, every invention that changed civilization, every work of art that moved millions, every business empire that reshaped industries, began in the same place. The solitary mind of one person sitting alone with their thoughts. Not in boardrooms filled with voices, not in networking events buzzing with noise, but in the sacred space where external chaos cannot reach and internal genius has room to breathe. The ancient Stoics called it anachoresis, the retreat into oneself. The desert fathers of Christianity sought it in caves and wilderness. Buddhist monks have practiced it for thousands of years. Carl Jung termed it active imagination. Every wisdom tradition, every philosophy that has survived the test of time, arrives at the same conclusion. Power comes from within, and you can only access it when you are alone. But modern society has declared war on solitude. We are told from childhood that isolation is dangerous, that humans are social animals who need constant connection. The education system punishes those who work alone. Corporate culture celebrates collaboration and penalizes independent thinking. Social media has turned human worth into a popularity contest measured by likes and shares. We have built a civilization that equates being alone with being defective. The result? An epidemic of people who cannot sit with themselves for 5 minutes without reaching for their phone, who fill every moment of silence with podcasts, music, notifications, anything to avoid the terrifying prospect of facing their own mind, who define their identity entirely through the opinions of others because they have never spent enough time alone to discover who they actually are. This is not accidental, and there is a reason why the most successful people in history, the ones who built empires and changed the world, were often described as loners, hermits, obsessive recluses, because they understood what the crowd never will, that your power is directly proportional to your ability to be alone without being lonely. Let me tell you about a man named Nikola Tesla, the inventor whose patents power the modern world. While Thomas Edison employed teams of engineers and ran a bustling laboratory, Tesla worked alone in a small room. He never married. He had almost no friends. He spent 18 hours a day in complete isolation, conducting experiments that existed only in his mind. People called him strange, eccentric, mad. What they did not understand was that Tesla was not running from society. He was protecting his genius from it. And Tesla once said, "The mind is sharper and keener in seclusion and uninterrupted solitude. Originality thrives in seclusion, free of outside influences beating upon us to cripple the creative mind. Be alone. That is the secret of invention. Be alone. That is when ideas are born. Not in brainstorming sessions, not in collaboration, in the uncompromising silence of a mind that belongs entirely to itself." Or consider Isaac Newton, who made his greatest discoveries not in Cambridge among scholars, but alone on a farm during the plague years of 1665 and 1666. In 18 months of enforced solitude, Newton invented calculus, discovered the laws of motion and gravity, and revolutionized optics. 300 years of scientific progress compressed into 1.5 years, because one man was forced to be alone with his thoughts. See, when asked how he made such discoveries, Newton replied, "By thinking on it continually, not by discussing it, not by seeking consensus, by sitting alone in silence and allowing his mind to explore territories where crowds never venture." The pattern repeats throughout history. Albert Einstein took long solitary walks every afternoon, refusing appointments, declining social invitations, protecting his thinking time as sacred. "I live in that solitude which is painful in youth, but delicious in the years of maturity," he wrote. Franz Kafka worked in insurance during the day and wrote alone at night, producing masterpieces that would shape modern literature. Emily Dickinson barely left her house for the last 20 years of her life, and in that isolation wrote some of the most profound poetry in the English language. But here is where it gets interesting. Modern neuroscience is now proving what these geniuses knew intuitively. Researchers at the University of Southern California discovered that the brain operates in fundamentally different ways when alone versus when in social situations. In solitude, the default mode network activates. This is the part of your brain responsible for self-reflection, imagination, and complex problem solving. It is the neural network where creativity lives. When you are around other people, your brain shifts into social mode, constantly processing facial expressions, tone of voice, social cues, hierarchies. It is using enormous computational power just to navigate the complexity of human interaction. This is why you can spend an entire day with friends and feel mentally exhausted, despite doing nothing intellectually challenging. Your brain was working overtime on social processing, leaving no resources for deep thinking. But when you are alone, genuinely alone with no expectation of interruption, the social processing shuts down. Suddenly, your brain has access to its full computational capacity. The default mode network fires up, making connections between ideas that seemed unrelated. This is why breakthroughs happen in the shower, on walks, in the middle of the night. Not because water or movement is magical, but because you are alone and your brain is finally free to think. A study at the Max Planck Institute showed that people who spend regular time in solitude score significantly higher on measures of creativity, problem solving, and emotional intelligence. They have stronger sense of identity. They make better decisions. They experience less anxiety and depression. Why? Because solitude is where you learn to regulate your own emotions instead of depending on others to do it for you. It is where you develop genuine self-knowledge instead of a self-image constructed from social feedback. But the benefits go even deeper. Dr. Matthew Bowker, a psychologist who studies solitude, found that people who are comfortable being alone have what he calls a robust sense of self. They know who they are independent of their relationships, their job, their social status. This makes them immune to the emotional manipulation that controls most people. When your sense of worth comes from within, you cannot be controlled by approval or disapproval from others. You become free in a way that terrifies people who need constant external validation. This explains why authoritarian regimes fear solitude. George Orwell understood this in 1984. The party eliminated privacy and solitude because it is impossible to control someone who has learned to think independently. You can manipulate crowds easily. You can program people through social pressure, but you cannot reach the person who has retreated into the fortress of their own mind. Look at the most powerful business leaders of our time. Warren Buffett spends 80% of his day reading alone in his office. He does not attend most meetings. He does not network at conferences. He sits alone, thinks deeply, and makes better decisions than anyone on Wall Street. Bill Gates took Think Weeks twice a year, where he would isolate himself in a cabin with nothing but books and his thoughts. No phone, no internet, no assistants, just him alone for 7 days. Microsoft's biggest strategic decisions came from those weeks of solitude. Steve Jobs took solitary walks when facing important decisions. Mark Zuckerberg blocks out 2-hour periods of uninterrupted time where nobody can reach him. Elon Musk has said he does his best thinking in the middle of the night, when the world is asleep and he can work without interruption. These are not antisocial hermits. These are people who understand that power requires uncompromising time, alone with your own thoughts. But solitude is not just about productivity or creativity. It is about becoming someone worth being alone with. Most people avoid solitude because they do not like the person they meet in the silence. They have spent their entire lives defining themselves through others, borrowed opinions, adopted beliefs, a personality constructed from social expectations. When they sit alone, they discover there is no authentic self underneath, just a hollow echo of other people's voices. This is why solitude feels uncomfortable at first. You are forced to confront the gap between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. You cannot hide from your own thoughts. You cannot distract yourself from uncomfortable truths. The mask you wear for others does not work when you are alone. This discomfort is not a sign that solitude is bad for you. It is a sign that you have work to do. The ancient Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "Everywhere means nowhere." But when a person spends all his time in foreign travel, he ends by having many acquaintances, but no friends. And the same thing must hold good of people who seek no intimate acquaintance with any one great writer, but skip from one to another, paying flying visits to them all. He was talking about books, but the principle applies to life. When you are everywhere, you are nowhere. When you are available to everyone, You belong to yourself least of all. There is a story about the Buddha that captures this truth. Before his enlightenment, Siddhartha practiced extreme asceticism with a group of monks. One day he walked away from them. He sat alone under a tree and made a radical decision. He would not move until he understood the nature of suffering. No teachers, no support system, just him alone with the fundamental questions of existence. For 49 days he sat. The monks thought he had given up, but Siddhartha understood that truth cannot be found in a crowd, because truth requires facing yourself without distraction. On the 49th day, he achieved enlightenment, not through collaboration, through the unbearable honesty of prolonged solitude. This is what most people cannot endure, the honesty. When you are alone long enough, you cannot lie to yourself anymore. You see your delusions clearly. You recognize the ways you sabotage yourself. You confront the gap between your potential and your actual life. This is terrifying, which is why most people will do anything to avoid it. They stay busy, surround themselves with noise, keep the calendar full, anything to avoid the mirror that solitude holds up. But for those brave enough to face it, solitude becomes the crucible of transformation. This is where you stop being who others need you to be and start becoming who you actually are. This is where borrowed beliefs are burned away and authentic conviction is forged. This is where the voice of society gets quiet enough that you can finally hear the voice of your own soul. Consider the story of Maya Angelou, who would rent a hotel room in whatever city she was in and go there to write. She would arrive at 6:30 in the morning, instruct the staff to remove everything from the walls, lay on the bed with a bottle of sherry, a deck of cards, and a Bible, and write until 2 in the afternoon. Alone, no phone, no visitors, nothing but her mind and the page. She did this for 50 years, 7 autobiographies, 3 books of essays, several books of poetry, plays, and movies, and all created in fierce, uncompromising solitude. Angelou once said, "I would be a liar, a hypocrite, or a fool, and I am not any of those to say that I do not care about the reactions of my family or the reading public. I do care. However, I am still the person who signs the checks, whose blood pressure rises and falls, who has to deal with my insecurities and my nightmares. So when I write for myself." That is the power of solitude. It returns ownership of your life to you. But let us be clear about what solitude is not. It is not loneliness. Loneliness is a painful feeling of being disconnected from others. Solitude is a chosen state of being comfortably alone. Lonely people feel empty when alone. People who have mastered solitude feel most fully themselves when alone. The difference is not semantic. It is the difference between suffering and power. You can be surrounded by people and feel desperately lonely. You can be completely alone and feel deeply fulfilled. The quality of your inner life determines which one you experience. This is why developing the capacity for solitude is not about becoming antisocial. It is about becoming so secure in yourself that you do not need others to complete you. Then when you do engage with people, you do it from a place of wholeness rather than neediness. The psychologist Donald Winnicott studied this extensively. He found that the capacity to be alone, what he called the capacity for solitude, is one of the most important signs of emotional maturity. Children need constant attention and validation. As we mature, we develop the ability to self-soothe, to entertain ourselves, to find meaning without external input. But many people never develop this capacity. They remain emotionally dependent on others their entire lives, terrified of being alone because they never learn to be good company for themselves. This dependency is a prison. It means your emotional state is determined by other people's availability and approval. It means you will compromise your values to maintain relationships. It means you will accept mediocrity in work and life because stepping into your full potential would require standing alone. And you have never learned how to do that without feeling like you are dying. The antidote is deliberate practice of solitude, not just being physically alone, but creating space for undistracted self-reflection. This is harder than it sounds in the modern world. We have engineered solitude out of existence. Smartphones mean we are never truly alone. Social media means we are never truly disconnected. Open plan offices mean we are never truly undistracted. We have created an environment hostile to the very practice that generates greatness. This is why you must treat solitude like strength training. You do not develop the capacity overnight. You start small. 10 minutes of sitting alone with no phone, no music, no input. Just you and your thoughts. It will feel uncomfortable. Your mind will race. You will feel the urge to check your phone, to do something, anything, to escape the silence. That discomfort is not the problem. It is the weight you are lifting. As you build the capacity, increase the duration. 20 minutes, an hour, eventually full days. You will notice something remarkable happening. The quality of your thinking improves. Ideas that seemed impossible to grasp become clear. Problems that felt overwhelming become solvable. You start having insights about your life that nobody else could have given you because they are not generic wisdom. They are truth specific to you, accessible only in the silence where your authentic self can speak. There is a specific practice that many great thinkers used, and it is almost entirely unknown today. They called it the hour of silence. Every day at the same time, they would retreat to a space where they could be completely alone and undisturbed. No agenda, no goal, just 1 hour of being present with themselves. Marcus Aurelius did this in the early morning. Kafka did it late at night. Virginia Woolf did it in her writing shed. And the time does not matter. The consistency does. What happens during this hour is magical. For the first 20 minutes, your mind unwinds. You think about your day, your problems, your to-do list. This is the noise clearing. Around the 25-minute mark, something shifts. The superficial thoughts quiet down. You start touching something deeper. This is where the real thinking happens. The insights, the creative connections, the uncomfortable truths. If you stop at 20 minutes, you never reach this layer. Most people spend their entire lives never reaching this layer. By the 45-minute mark, you have entered a state that psychologists call flow. You are thinking without the constant interference of your inner critic. Ideas flow freely. You are simultaneously relaxed and intensely focused. This is the state where Einstein made his discoveries, where Thoreau wrote Walden, where every creative genius in history did their best work. And it is only accessible through prolonged solitude. But here is what nobody tells you. The hour of silence is not just about productivity. It is about maintaining your humanity in a world designed to strip it away. Every institution you interact with, from corporations to governments to social media platforms, is trying to colonize your attention. They need you distracted, reactive, scrolling, consuming, comparing yourself to others, because people in that state are easy to control and profitable to exploit. Solitude is resistance. When you reclaim your attention, you reclaim your power. When you defend your time alone as sacred, you are defending your right to think independently. So this is why solitude makes people uncomfortable. Not just the person practicing it, but everyone around them. Because someone who is comfortable being alone cannot be controlled through social pressure. They do not need your approval. They do not fear your judgment. They have found something more valuable than your opinion, themselves. Look at the lives of people who changed the world. Almost universally, they had a reputation for being difficult to reach. They did not answer every email. They did not attend every event. They were not available whenever someone wanted their time. This was not arrogance. This was understanding that their time alone was where their value was created. The world wanted access to their genius, but that genius only existed because they protected their solitude fiercely. Beethoven would take long walks alone, and sometimes for hours, completely lost in thought. If someone tried to join him, he would walk faster to lose them. Thoreau rarely had visitors, and considered most conversation a waste of time. Coco Chanel locked herself in her apartment for extended periods and refused to see anyone. Charles Darwin worked in his study from 8 in the morning until 9:30, then took a solitary walk, then worked again from 10:30 to noon, every day, for 40 years, no exceptions. These were not social failures. These were people who understood that their gift to the world required protecting their inner world from the constant intrusion of others. They were not being selfish. They were being responsible stewards of their own genius. Because genius, real genius, is fragile. It requires silence to grow. And it requires protection from the constant noise of other people's opinions, expectations, and agendas. This is the paradox of solitude. You have to be alone to develop the gifts you will share with the world. The writer cannot write surrounded by people asking questions. The artist cannot create in a room full of critics. The thinker cannot think when constantly interrupted. The builder cannot build when always explaining. Great work requires great solitude. Not all the time, but enough of the time that deep work becomes possible. There is a concept in Judaism called hitbodedut, which means self-seclusion. It is the practice of going to a secluded place and speaking to God as you would speak to a friend. Not formal prayer, not ritual, just honest, unfiltered conversation about whatever is on your heart. And the ancient rabbis understood something profound. You cannot be fully honest with another person, even God, if you are not first honest with yourself. And you can only be honest with yourself in solitude. This practice has been adopted by people from every tradition and no tradition. The basic form remains the same. Find a place where you can be alone. Speak out loud about whatever is troubling you, confusing you, exciting you, not to anyone in particular, just to the universe, to God, to yourself. The act of verbalizing thoughts that usually remain internal has extraordinary power. You hear your own delusions. You recognize your own wisdom. You become both speaker and listener. And in that dual role, you gain clarity impossible to achieve through silent thinking alone. I know a venture capitalist who made his fortune by doing something unusual, Before every major investment decision, he would check into a hotel under a fake name, turn off his phone, and spend 3 days alone. No partner meetings, no expert consultations, no data analysis. Just him alone with the decision. He would walk, he would sit, he would think. On the 3rd day, he would make his choice. His success rate was extraordinary, not because he had better information than other investors, but because he had better judgment. And judgment, real judgment, only develops in the silence, where you can hear your own wisdom above the noise of others. This is what most people never learn. Your best thinking is already inside you. It does not come from consuming more information, reading more books, listening to more podcasts, or networking with more people. It comes from creating enough silence that you can finally hear it. Every spiritual tradition teaches this in some form. The kingdom of God is within you. The Buddha nature is your true nature. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, all pointing to the same truth. What you are searching for is not out there. It is in here, but you have to get quiet enough to find it. There is a story about a Zen master who was asked by a student how to find enlightenment. The master took the student to a well and told him to look at his reflection in the water. As the student looked, the master threw a stone, shattering the reflection into 1,000 ripples. "That is your mind on a normal day," the master said, constantly disturbed by external events, she unable to see clearly. He waited until the water became perfectly still again. "This is your mind in solitude, clear, reflective, capable of seeing truth." The student understood. The water was always there. The capacity for clarity was always present. It just needed stillness to emerge. But achieving this stillness in modern life requires radical choices. You cannot fit solitude into the margins of an overcommitted schedule. You cannot practice it for 5 minutes before bed and expect transformation. You have to build your life around it. This means saying no to invitations. It means being unavailable. It means accepting that some people will think you are weird, antisocial, or arrogant. Let them think what they want. Their opinion of you is not your concern. Your relationship with yourself is. The writer Maya Angelou had a rule. When she was writing a book, she would not attend dinner parties, accept speaking engagements, or commit to social obligations. For months at a time, she was simply unavailable. She understood that every yes to something external was a no to her inner work. Most people live the opposite way. They say yes to everything external until there is no space left for their inner world. Then they wonder why they feel empty, exhausted, disconnected from themselves. You are not obligated to be available to everyone all the time. You are not obligated to respond to every message immediately. You are not obligated to attend every event, accept every invitation, or maintain relationships that drain you. These are choices, and every choice has a cost. The cost of constant availability is the loss of yourself. Is that a price you are willing to pay? Consider what it would mean to protect 1 hour a day of absolute solitude. No phone, no interruptions, no agenda. Just you alone with your thoughts. For 1 year, that is 365 hours. That is 15 full days. 15 days where you are not consuming, not performing, not managing other people's opinions of you. 15 days where you are simply being yourself without an audience. Do you understand how rare that is? Most people do not get 15 minutes. Now imagine what might emerge from 15 days of undistracted time with your own mind. the ideas you might have, the clarity you might achieve, the relationship with yourself you might develop, the person you might become. This is not hypothetical. This is how every person who has ever achieved anything remarkable spent their time, in fierce, uncompromising solitude. There is a final secret that the greatest practitioners of solitude understood. Solitude is not the destination. It is the training ground. You do not retreat from the world to escape it. You retreat from the world to become capable of meeting it with your full power. This is what Thoreau did. He spent 2 years in isolation at Walden Pond, then returned to society and became one of the most influential voices in American history. He needed the solitude to find his voice, but the voice was meant to be heard. This is the difference between isolation and solitude. Isolation is running away. Solitude is training. You are not becoming a hermit. You are becoming someone strong enough to stand alone, which is the only way to stand for anything that matters. Because every important battle in life and every moment that defines who you are, you face alone. You can have allies, you can have supporters, but in the final analysis, when it comes time to choose courage or comfort, integrity or acceptance, your authentic path or the path of least resistance, you are alone in that decision. The quality of that decision depends entirely on how well you know yourself, and you only know yourself through solitude. As we reach the end of this exploration, I want you to consider something. You have just spent time alone with these ideas. No one forced you to listen. No one is here watching you. This is solitude. And in this solitude, something has happened. You have thought thoughts you do not normally think. You have considered possibilities you usually ignore. You have spent time with a version of yourself that only emerges when the world gets quiet. This version of you, the one that exists in the silence, is your true self, not the persona you maintain for others, not the role you play at work, not the image you project on social media, the person you are when no one is watching. This is the person who holds your real power. This is the person who knows your real dreams. This is the person who sees your real potential. And this person only speaks in solitude. The question is not whether you have time for solitude. You have the same 24 hours as everyone else. The question is whether you have the courage to face yourself without distraction. Whether you are willing to be bored, uncomfortable, and alone long enough that something real can emerge. Whether you are ready to stop being who everyone else needs you to be and start becoming who you actually are. Because here is the truth that changes everything. You are not powerless. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are simply disconnected from yourself. And the path back is through silence, through stillness, through the deliberate, courageous practice of being alone. The most successful people stay alone because they understand what the crowd never will, that your power is not in your network, your followers, your connections, or your ability to be liked by everyone. Your power is in your ability to access the depths of your own mind without needing validation from anyone else. Your power is in knowing yourself so well that no one else's opinion can shake your foundation. Your power is in the fortress of solitude you build within yourself, where the noise of the world cannot reach. This fortress is not built in a day. It is built minute by minute, hour by hour, choice by choice. Every time you choose silence over noise, solitude over distraction, depth over breadth, you add another stone to the wall. Every time you protect your time alone as sacred, you strengthen the foundation. Every time you sit with yourself when it is uncomfortable and resist the urge to escape, you prove to yourself that you are worthy of your own company. And when that fortress is strong enough, something remarkable happens. You stop needing the crowd. You stop performing for others. You stop measuring your worth by external validation. You become free in a way that most people will never understand, because most people will never do the work. So I will leave you with this. The power of solitude is not about being alone. It is about being whole. It is about becoming so fully yourself that you have something real to give the world. It is about developing such a strong relationship with your own mind that you can think clearly when everyone else is reacting. It is about building such deep self-knowledge that you know what you stand for before the world demands you take a stand. This is the power that built empires. This is the power that wrote symphonies. This is the power that launched revolutions. This is the power that changed the world. And it is available to anyone brave enough to spend time alone with themselves. The question is, are you? You do not need to go to Tibet or lock yourself in darkness, but the principle remains true. The light you are searching for, the clarity, the purpose, the power, it is already inside you. The external world is so loud and demanding that you cannot see it. Solitude is not about adding something to your life. It is about removing everything that prevents you from seeing what was always there. Let me tell you about Emily Dickinson, who became one of America's greatest poets, despite barely leaving her family home for 20 years. She wore only white. She refused visitors. By conventional standards, she was a failure, a recluse. But in that solitude, Emily Dickinson wrote nearly 1,800 poems. She revolutionized American poetry. She explored death, immortality, and consciousness with a depth scholars are still unpacking today. She did not waste her life. She used solitude to create a body of work that outlived everyone who thought she was wasting her time. Dickinson wrote, "The soul selects her own society, then shuts the door." She understood that you cannot serve everyone. You cannot maintain your integrity while constantly accommodating others. At some point, you must choose between the world's expectations and your soul's truth. This is not selfishness. This is self-preservation. The world will consume you if you let it. Every person who wants your time has legitimate claims. But if you honor every claim, you will have nothing left for yourself. And a person with nothing left has nothing real to offer anyone else. Andrew Carnegie would retreat to his estate in Scotland every summer for 3 months. No business, no meetings. Bach, his partners, thought he was mad. But Carnegie understood those 3 months of solitude generated the strategic insights that made the other 9 months possible. Compare this to the modern executive who is always available, always in meetings, always responding to emails. This person is not powerful. This person is controlled. Real power requires the ability to step back, to think independently, to see patterns that the constantly busy never notice. There is a concept in systems thinking called requisite variety. The element with the most flexibility controls the system. The person who can adapt, who can think from multiple perspectives, who can generate novel solutions, has power. And flexibility of mind requires space to explore different angles, to let your mind wander into new territory. This is why totalitarian regimes, eliminate privacy and solitude. They know that independent thinking is impossible when the mind never has space to think independently. Control people's time and attention, and you control their thoughts. Allow people solitude, and they start thinking for themselves. But you do not need a dystopian government to lose your capacity for solitude. Modern technology does the job just as effectively. Your smartphone ensures you are never truly alone. The solution is radical simplicity. Designate a time each day when you are unreachable. Turn off your phone. Do not check email. Just sit with yourself. There is a Quaker practice called waiting worship, where the community gathers in complete silence. No sermon, no music. Sometimes the silence lasts an hour. For those who practice it, the silence becomes sacred. It is where truth emerges, not the truth someone tells you, but the truth you discover within yourself. You do not need to join a religious community. Create your own ritual of silence. The form does not matter. What matters is protecting time alone with yourself as sacred. You are the most important person in your life. You are the only person you will be with every moment until you die. If you do not know yourself, you will spend your life running from the one person you cannot escape. Let me share something that might sound controversial. Most people's fear of solitude is not really about being alone. It is about what they might discover about themselves in the silence. They are afraid they might realize they are living the wrong life, working the wrong job, pursuing the wrong goals, maintaining relationships that do not serve them, playing a role that is not really them. The constant noise and activity serve a purpose. They prevent these realizations from emerging, because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. And seeing the truth demands action. This is why so many people's lives change after a period of enforced solitude. An illness that requires bed rest, a retreat, a sabbatical, a period of unemployment. When the constant activity stops, when the noise finally quiets, they see clearly for the first time. And what they see often leads to radical change. Career changes, relationship changes, life changes, not because they became different people, but because they finally became themselves. Consider Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps. In Man's Search for Meaning, he describes how solitude became a source of power, even in horror. He would retreat into his own mind, visualizing himself after liberation. This inner world kept him alive when everything external was designed to destroy him. He wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." That space is the territory of solitude, where you exercise the only freedom that can never be taken, the freedom to choose your own thoughts and responses. Most people live in constant reaction. Something happens, they react. There is no space, no pause, no conscious choice. Solitude creates the space where reaction becomes response, where you stop being controlled by external events and start directing your own experience. There is a Stoic practice called negative visualization, where you imagine losing everything you value. You sit with that imagined loss until it becomes real in your mind. This breaks your attachment to external circumstances. It reminds you that your core self remains intact regardless of what you lose. And this realization is liberation. But you cannot do this practice in constant activity. You need solitude to explore these territories. Think about a warrior training for battle. The actual battle might last hours. The training lasts years. The training happens in solitude, repetitive practice, building muscle memory, developing instinct. When the battle comes, the warrior does not think. They act from a place deeper than thought, from patterns ingrained through thousands of hours of solitary practice. Life works the same way. The moments that define you are brief, but your response to them is determined by years of preparation, and that preparation happens in solitude. Now let me address the elephant in the room. In a world that measures success by connections, choosing solitude feels like career suicide. You are supposed to be networking, building your personal brand. How can you possibly succeed if you are spending time alone? Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most networking is useless. Most conferences are a waste of time. Most professional relationships are superficial. You are not building real social capital. You are participating in an elaborate game where everyone pretends to be more important than they are. And while you are playing this game, you are not doing the deep work that would actually make you valuable. The people who become truly successful, who build things that matter, who create work that resonates, they are not the most networked. They are the most skilled, the most creative, the most insightful. And those qualities are developed in solitude, not at networking events. You develop skill through focused practice. You develop creativity through undisturbed exploration. You develop insight through deep reflection. None of these happen in a crowded room making small talk. Stanley Kubrick was notorious for being difficult to reach. He lived in England, refused most interviews, and spent years between films. His peers thought he was committing career suicide, but Kubrick understood that his work spoke for itself. He protected the solitary work time necessary to achieve perfection. Every film he made became a classic because he was not building a personal brand. He was building a body of work that would outlive any brand. Compare this to the modern content creator who posts every day, responds to every comment, maintains constant visibility. This person might have millions of followers, but will anyone remember their work in 20 years? Or are they just creating an endless stream of forgettable content designed to feed the algorithm's hunger for novelty? There is a difference between being famous and being great. Famous requires constant visibility. Great requires extended invisibility, broken by rare moments of emergence with work that matters. This is the paradox at the heart of solitude. You have to disappear from the world to create something the world needs. The writer must disappear into their manuscript. And the scientist must disappear into their research. The entrepreneur must disappear into building their product. They emerge only when they have something real to offer. But modern culture has reversed this. We are encouraged to be constantly visible even when we have nothing worth showing, to maintain presence even when we should be developing substance. Let me be direct. If you want to achieve anything significant, you must become comfortable with long periods of obscurity. You must be willing to work on things no one sees. You must develop such strong internal validation that you do not need external feedback to keep going. This is not natural. Humans are social creatures. We evolved to care about the tribe's opinion. But the tribe is no longer 100 people you know personally. It is billions of strangers on social media. And their opinion is worse than worthless. It is actively destructive to anyone trying to create something meaningful. There is a cognitive bias called social proof. We determine what is correct by looking at what others are doing. But social proof is optimized for survival in small groups, not for excellence in a complex world. What everyone is doing is average. If you want to create something exceptional, you must do what no one else is doing. This is where solitude becomes essential. When you are alone, you cannot rely on social proof. You must develop your own judgment, your own standards. This is terrifying at first, but as you practice solitude, you develop an internal compass that is more reliable than any external opinion. You learn to trust yourself. Consider Vincent van Gogh, who sold one painting during his lifetime. He died believing he was a failure, but he kept painting for 10 years in poverty and obscurity, sustained only by his internal conviction. No galleries, no critics, no collectors, zero external validation. He had such a strong relationship with his own vision that he did not need anyone else to confirm it. Today, Van Gogh's paintings sell for over $100 million. But what matters is this: he created them in complete solitude, with no audience, no validation, no recognition. His solitude was the crucible in which success was forged. He spent so much time alone with his art that he developed such a unique vision that when the world finally caught up, his work was recognized as genius. This pattern repeats throughout history. Every artist, writer, scientist, or entrepreneur who created something truly original did it alone. Not because they were antisocial, but because originality requires independence from the crowd. You cannot create something new while constantly checking if others approve. The crowd does not know what it wants until someone shows them. And the person who shows them is always someone who spent enough time alone to see something the crowd could not see. But let us go deeper. Solitude is not just about creating great work. It is about becoming a complete human being. Most people are fragments. They are whoever their boss needs at work, whoever their family expects at home, whoever their friends want when socializing. They are a collection of roles with no stable center. Ask them who they are, and they will tell you what they do. They have no answer for who they are when no one is watching. Solitude is where you discover who you are when no one is watching. And that person, that core self, that is the only version of you that is real. Everything else is performance. Some of that performance is necessary. We all have roles to play. But if you never spend time with the person underneath the roles, you lose connection with your own humanity. You become a sophisticated automation, executing programs written by others, living a life that is not really yours. The existential philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote about this. He said most people are so busy being what others expect that they never become themselves. They reach the end of their lives having never met who they actually were. This is the great tragedy. Not that you failed by conventional standards, but that you succeeded at becoming someone other than yourself. Solitude prevents this tragedy. When you spend regular time alone, you stay in touch with your authentic desires and values. You notice when you are drifting off course. You recognize when you are living for someone else's approval. This awareness creates the possibility for correction. There is a practice from a Zen teacher. At the end of each day, sit in silence for 20 minutes and ask yourself 3 questions. What did I do today that was truly me? What did I do that was just playing a role? If today was my last day, would I be satisfied? Do not judge, just observe. Over time, you will see which parts of your life are authentic and which are performance. But this practice requires solitude. You cannot do it with your phone buzzing. You cannot do it with the television on. You cannot do it while scrolling. You need silence. You need to turn inward. You need to hear the quiet voice that speaks only when everything else is quiet. This voice knows what you really want. It knows what you are avoiding. It knows the truth you are too scared to face. But it speaks in whispers, and you will never hear it in the noise. Let me tell you about the neuroscience of solitude. When you are in social situations, your brain activates the social salience network, constantly processing social information. This takes enormous computational power. When you are alone, this network shuts down. Your brain shifts into the default mode network where self-reflection, creativity, and insight happen. Research at Harvard showed that people make more creative discoveries when alone than in groups. Another study found that voluntary solitude increases activity in the prefrontal cortex while decreasing activity in the amygdala. Solitude makes you smarter and braver. But these benefits only appear with voluntary solitude. When you choose to be alone, your brain interprets it as safe and enhances function. The meaning you assign determines the biological outcome. Now consider what this means for practical life. What if you deliberately scheduled solitude the way you schedule important meetings? What if you protected that time as fiercely as you protect work commitments? This requires complete reversal of conventional thinking. Instead of filling your calendar and hoping for gaps, you start with blocks of solitude and fit everything else around them. I know an executive who blocks 6 hours every Sunday for solitude. No family. No social commitments, no work. Just him alone with his thoughts. In those 6 hours, he reviews his week, plans his month, and reconnects with himself. He says those 6 hours generate more clarity than the other 162 hours combined. The depth of your thinking is limited by the depth of your solitude. True solitude requires 3 things: physical separation from others, mental separation from distractions, and temporal depth, enough consecutive time that your mind can settle and go deep. You need hours long enough that you forget the outside world exists. Bill Gates takes 2 think weeks per year. Warren Buffett spends most of his time reading alone. These are not luxuries. They are tools. They understand that their most valuable asset is clarity of thought, and clarity requires space. But you do not need a second house or private office. You need commitment. A library is free. A park bench is free. Your bedroom with the door locked is free. The barrier is not money. The barrier is your willingness to disappoint others by being unavailable. If you cannot disappoint others, you will disappoint yourself. You cannot say yes to everything external without saying no to your internal life. Choose. The ancient Stoics had a practice called retreat into yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He was emperor of Rome with the entire Mediterranean world at his disposal. But he understood that the most important retreat was not geographical, it was psychological. The retreat into solitude is about ceasing the constant outward orientation and turning inward instead. This inward turn is what Buddha called the inner citadel. It is what every wisdom tradition points to. The source of your power is not out there, it is in here. But you cannot access it if you are always seeking externally. You have to come home to yourself, and you can only come home when you are alone. The final truth is this: solitude is not about rejecting others. It is about having something real to offer them. When you are constantly with people, you give them your depleted self, your tired mind, your scattered attention. But when you regularly retreat into solitude, you replenish. You return to yourself. When you engage with others, you bring your whole self. You are present. This is the ultimate paradox. You have to leave people to truly be with them. You have to be alone to not be lonely. We are not inexhaustible. We need to recharge. And the only charging station that works is solitude. So the question at the end of this journey is whether you will choose yourself, because that is what solitude really is. It is the choice to honor your own mind as worthy of time and attention, to treat your inner life as important as your outer life, to recognize that you are not just a node in a network. You are a consciousness with depth and infinite potential. But that potential only unfolds when you give it space. The most successful people stay alone because they know that you are the most important relationship you will ever have. You are with yourself every moment, every other relationship, every goal, and every achievement passes through the filter of your own consciousness. If that consciousness is confused and scattered, everything else will be distorted. But if that consciousness is clear and centered, everything else will be enhanced. This is the power of solitude, not withdrawal, not rejection, not escape, but the cultivation of the inner life that makes the outer life worth living, the development of the core self that remains stable when everything external is chaos, the discovery of the voice within that speaks truth when every voice outside speaks lies, and that power is waiting for you, not in some distant future, not after you achieve some goal or complete some preparation. Right now, this moment, all you have to do is stop, be quiet, be alone, and listen. Because everything you have ever needed to know about who you are, what you want and what you are capable of, it is already inside you. It has been there all along. You just needed the world to get quiet enough that you could finally hear it. So I leave you with this. Not a command, not advice, just an invitation. Try it. 1 hour. Today. No phone, no music, no distractions. Just you alone with your thoughts. See what emerges. See who you meet in that silence. See what that person has to tell you. Because in the end, the most successful people do not stay alone because they are antisocial or arrogant or afraid of the world. They stay alone because they have discovered something the world desperately needs. Themselves, their real self. Not the performance, not the mask, not the role, but the authentic human underneath. And once you discover that person, you realize something extraordinary. You were never alone. You were always whole. You were always enough. You just needed the silence to remember it. The power of solitude is the power to remember who you actually are. And when you remember that, when you reconnect with that core truth, everything changes. Not because the external world changes, but because you are no longer controlled by it. You have found your center. You have found your strength. You have found yourself. And that is the only power that can never be taken from you.